Thank you all for being here today for the webinar for Alternative Teaching Special Education Teachers. We'll go ahead and get started.
Hi everyone, welcome to our introductory webinar for special educational alternative teaching students. We're very excited to interact with you today. Most of you should recognize my name. I am Amy Schwartz, the Clinical Practice Specialist for GCU's Alternative Teaching Pathways. I'm the person who processes your alternative teaching paperwork every year. My teaching background is in elementary math, and I actually did my student teaching in Australia. I then taught middle school math for 5 years here in Arizona before I moved to GCU. And we are all part of the College of Education here at the university, and I actually share an office wall with Tracy here.
Hello everyone, my name is Tracy Vasquez. My experience is in teaching middle school science and also elementary primary grades. And I'm very excited to be working for the Grand Canyon University College of Education. I do get to teach our student teachers occasionally. And I also work on our professional learning network, which is our virtual online community. And I supervise many of our student teachers out in the field. I also work very closely with our programs team, Julie and Emily, on various projects. I'll go ahead and let Julie introduce herself next.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Julie Blair. I've actually been in education for 20 years, going into year 21 this fall, woohoo. 12 of those, now almost 21 years, I was actually at the secondary level. I worked at the high school level in grades 9 through 12, working primarily with students with learning disabilities and emotional disabilities. And I also was a general education teacher, teaching junior and freshman English too for a few of those years. So it's nice because I was able to have both those lenses. And then moving over into higher education over here at GCU, I've had a few different roles from being full-time faculty to curriculum and instruction, and then now working with our academics programs team. And it's been very exciting because I get to oversee all of your requirements and needs to make sure that you're ready to go for the field. I oversee all of our special education programs and secondary programs alongside of working with Emily. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily next.
Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. We're really excited that you are all here and we're looking forward to learning more about you and your needs throughout this webinar. So my name is Emily Farkas. I'm an adjunct faculty and manager of academic programs for the College of Education. So in my role as manager of academic programs, I help oversee and organize programs to meet accreditation requirements alongside with Julie, my counterpart. And I have been in education for 16 years, going on to 17. One of those years were teaching English language arts in public Title I Arizona schools. And 1 year was teaching abroad English as a second language in Budapest, Hungary. So that's a little bit about me. Again, thank you guys for joining us. And I'm going to turn it on over to Tracy so we can jump right on in.
So before we get started too much into this presentation, I wanted to share a little bit with you about how this will proceed. If you've never used Zoom before, you'll notice your controls are near the top of your screen. If you hover your mouse towards the top, that's where you can access the mute and video controls and also the chat box. Where we will be asking some questions. Also, this presentation is being recorded, so any voices or video visuals will also be in this recording. We also want to make sure that we eliminate as much background noise as possible. So when you're not interacting in the presentation, please make sure you mute yourself. And we will also be using a few polls throughout this presentation to get some feedback from you. So we'll go ahead and get started with one of those for practice. So with this interactive poll, please go ahead and make your best choice as quickly as possible so we can proceed with the presentation. So first of all, what is your anticipated graduation date? And with this poll, keep in mind the semester you select is going to be the semester where you plan on student teaching and finishing your program. So if you're planning on student teaching in the fall 2020, this fall, and completing in November, December, that will be your selection there. And spring 2021, fall 2021, spring 2022, or unknown. And then please share a little bit about where you are located, just in the general vicinity, northern Arizona, central Arizona, or southern Arizona. Okay, perfect. Looks like most people have gone ahead and voted. So here we have that most people are planning on student teaching and finishing up this fall 2020. And we do have most of our attendees here today in Central Arizona, which is not surprising as that does include our Phoenix area. Okay, so we're going to go on now to share with you the goals and objectives of today's session.
So great, thanks, Tracy. So just a little bit of background of why we wanted to bring you here just as a smaller group for the alternative teaching, excuse me, certification specifically for special education teachers. This last year I was able to work alongside our Arizona Department of Education and a teach camp opportunity, and they wanted to hone in on working and looking to see the needs of what our novice special education teachers, what they needed out there. And it was really eye-opening for me because I got to work alongside all these novice special education teachers. Their first year could be their second year. Now, some of them were just making a change from maybe it was they were going from elementary then into special education, but it was full of great conversations and feedback. But one area that I noticed in particular that just they felt like they needed just a little bit more support was in our alternative teaching route. In particular, I was able to talk to a few of our GCU students that are in this program, and I just brought it back to our team and with our clinical practice team, and I said, you know, this has been such a great opportunity that I was able to do this last year. Could we maybe do something very similar here at GCU just to give another layer of support for our alternative teaching teachers going into the classrooms? Because what was eye-opening for me too was realizing all of you were at different parts of your program. So some of you might not have finished all of your coursework yet. Some of you might already be done. You're going into student teaching, which we do see right now with the poll, which is awesome. And I'm so happy for you. But we know we just want to make sure that you're feeling prepared. So the goal of really this webinar today is we want to help make sure you're feeling prepared. We want to get some insight from you and some takeaways just to help us better understand what you may need or how we could better even support you more throughout this process and this year, a lot of you going into that student teaching in the fall. And most importantly, we want to make sure you're feeling empowered, you're feeling good. We know there's a lot that you're probably thinking about, your minds are going crazy, and we just want to make sure you're gonna be awesome. We're gonna set you up for success and you got this. So today that we're going to be looking at becoming familiar with that alternative teaching special education concepts and preparing you for your new school year. We are going to take some surveys in between with the polling, and then also we're going to share with a survey that we're going to be sending out, and we'll talk about that a little bit more towards the end. We're definitely going to give you some insights, some thoughts to think about, make sure you're doing, as well as some resources at the end, and we'll make sure that we get those to you as well and where you can go to look for those. And then discussing some possible future professional development workshops with you all at the end. So Emily, I'm going to turn it over to you though to get us going and get us started with a little icebreaker.
Yes. So we just want to get to know a little bit about you so that we can just kind of have a better understanding of where you're coming from and what your interests are. So if you could open up the chat box, we would like you to share a response. So we know this is a bit of an odd time considering, but where is the farthest place that you would like to travel? So if you could, again, open up that chat box and address the question, where is the farthest place you would like to travel? We're definitely interested to hear your responses. So hearing some great things so far. Bali, the UK, Japan, China, Croatia, lots of different Europe, all over the end of the universe. That has to be my favorite answer. New Zealand, Australia. You guys definitely seem like you have the travel bug, just like us ladies here talking to you today. Back to Australia. So you guys definitely are very interested in seeing the world, and that I cannot tell you enough will be so fantastic for you to do so, because you can share those experiences with your students and inspire them to travel as well. So if you can, get on out there, maybe when everything is not so odd considering, you know, the pandemic and all. So thank you for sharing those. We definitely appreciate it, and it shares a little bit more insight about your interests. So thank you. We definitely really want to move on forward, and we're going to jump right into the professional world.
Yeah, and this is a reminder because I know all of you are at different parts of your alternative teaching journey, but as both a teacher and an alternative teaching student, you have both professional support roles at GCU and your school site. So as a reminder, some notable players are your GCU faculty supervisor, who is that GCU approved evaluator who observes you teaching in the field and gives you feedback on your teaching twice a semester. So in a perfect world, that person is following you and observing you throughout your whole program. And many of you are going to have that same supervisor for your student teaching coming up, and they're going to observe you 4 times instead of the 2 that you're used to. And you'll also have your GCU course instructors and your GCU counselors at your school site. Your mentor is your main support role, and that's the person that we have on file to be your alternative teaching mentor during the school year. And then you'll also have your principal, fellow teachers, and support staff. As your clinical practice specialist, I'm another one of your GCU support roles. So if you have any questions about your placement or certification, I'm the one to come to. I do have to ensure that we have the correct paperwork on file for you. So many of you know this already, but if anything changes about your position, especially your alternative teaching mentor, please make sure to reach out to me and provide the updated paperwork. And if you're interested in more detailed information regarding these roles and responsibilities, refer back to the Alternative Teaching Manual. That's on the Student Success Center, or the Alternative Teaching Orientation. Many of you know the Student Success Center, the SSC, could be accessed from your online courses. And then you would locate that manual from the College of Ed Alternative Pathways to Teaching resources. And some of you might have not even looked at that manual, but there is more details if you're interested there. And then the alternative teaching orientation, that's where you were emailed to your GCU email at the beginning of starting the alternative teaching program once you were approved. And it's an invite to the Professional Learning Network, our PLN, and that's where the alternative teaching orientation is housed. And we're actually going to talk more about the PLN today, but you can go back and look at that for more information on these roles and responsibilities. So now we'll move right along to getting to know your work environment.
Great. So thanks, Amy. Now you are all in that different position because not only you maybe finishing up your requirements with us with GCU, but you're also going into your professional role, your classrooms. And we're going to pull you here in just a second, but one big area that will help us guide some conversations and also maybe to see where you may need more support too, is in where are you going to be teaching or how are you going to be teaching this school year? And it might look a little different depending on your level. If it's elementary, it's middle school, it's high school. I know when I was teaching, my resource, what that looked like and my self-contained and my inclusion model was maybe a little bit different than what it's going to look like where you're going to go in and you're going to be teaching. But we are going to pull you here in just a second, and we want you to hopefully be able to provide us with where you're going to be teaching this coming up fall, or within your student teaching, or just in this fall in general. Will you be are you going to be teaching in an inclusion model where you're fully going to be in a gen ed classroom? Will you be in a resource setting? Will you be working with students coming to you? Will you have your own self-contained room? Are you going to be working with your students the majority of the day, or maybe within a content area? Because that could be very, that was something that I did at the high school level. It could be a combination of all three, because I definitely had that experience myself at the high school level where I was doing all three within a day. So Tracy, I'm going to let you do the poll. So if you could give us some feedback in your teaching setting, and I know you have another question there too.
Yes, please go ahead and share with us what is your special education teaching setting for this upcoming fall semester? And also, if you do know, who is your main source of support at your school site? Who's going to be supporting and helping you along the most? Will that be one of your school administrators, special education director, alternative teaching mentor on file, a combination of these roles, or if you're just not sure? Okay, thank you. So we've got a lot of feedback from you here. It looks like many of you already know you're going to be in a self-contained setting. And it looks like our main source of support is going to be the special education director and a combination of several different roles.
Great. So this is good to know. And I love seeing the feedback where the majority of you know what you're going to be going into and you know your contact person, because that is so important. Please make sure that you are reaching out with them if you haven't already had these conversations to help get you ready to go for the fall. Again, that's your point of contact, whether it's that special ed teacher, or excuse me, special education director, your principal, the mentor that you have on file. It's just really important right now that you're setting those expectations and understanding the protocols, especially your evaluations, communicating with your supervisor who's going to be coming into your classroom, or your administrator coming into your classroom. It's great to even make sure that you're creating your portfolio, or you're keeping your artifacts, you're documenting how you're going to showcase and demonstrate that you're meeting your evaluation criteria. And that might be different from your GCU, because again, remember, you're in both worlds. So you're trying to still fulfill your GCU requirements, but you're also going to have requirements as well with your site, with your administration. And those evaluations, they might look a little different, or you might have to approach them a little bit different, but it's so important to make sure that you are starting off on the right foot, knowing what's going to be the expectation, even getting schedules down, maybe even knowing when they're going to be coming in, when they're going to be observing. It's really important to get all that squared away as soon as you can, because we know as soon as that school year gets started, it gets busy. And we just want to make sure that you're getting all that squared away in the beginning. Make sure that you're advocating for yourself and your students too when you're getting in there, and maybe you're seeing your classrooms. If you see a need, do you have enough desks? Do you have enough materials? Do you have enough resources? Even check for safety, no leaking, no leaky roofs, or broken locks or anything like that. Make sure that you're kind of taking a full assessment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that too. We're going to give you some resources to think about doing, like your own little checklist when you're going in there. That way you're having that conversation, and you're meeting with them, and you're just making sure you're being taken care of as well as your students. And most importantly too, your roster or your caseload. That could be a little different. Not all the time your roster is your caseload, especially for me when I was teaching at that high school level. I was teaching my own self-contained classroom, or my own classes, excuse me, but not all the students that I might have been teaching might have been on my caseload. So it's also important to know who you're teaching, but also who are you responsible for and overseeing in regards to your caseloads. And we'll touch more on that too. Tracy, if we can continue on to the next slide. Continuing to still get to know your work environment. Not only knowing who's going to be, who your point person is, your contact person, whether that, not only your mentor, but maybe your special ed director, but you have a whole support staff on your campus, and also people that you're going to be working with, and making sure that you're getting to know, you're introducing yourself, your paraprofessionals, nurses, the psychologists. Maybe they're not on your campus, maybe they're itinerant, but reaching out to them, connecting with them. You're going to be working with them a lot. Behavioral coach, instructional coaches, your school secretary. I cannot say enough about them. They're amazing, a great resource. And most importantly, your general education teachers, because you're going to be collaborating with them quite a bit. Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So to reiterate what Julie shared, the general education teacher also plays a very, very important role as well. Connecting and collaborating with general ed teachers helps to build communication and a space to share what is best for your shared special education students. As a general education teacher, I cannot reiterate how important that is, to forge that communication and that bond, that relationship between you and the general ed teacher. A great place to start is to share IEPs and schedules with those general ed teachers prior to the start of the school year. So I just want to share a few of my experiences regarding that, two very, very different experiences. So I taught here in Arizona at two different schools, two different school districts, and then one school district at the start of the school year, I had special education students in my classroom for the first couple of weeks of school. Without any communication from the special ed teacher at all. So I really had no way of meeting the needs of those students in my class, and I had no way of knowing how long those students would be in my class and how I could differentiate to meet their needs as I was jumping into my general ed curriculum, English language arts curriculum. So that put me in a bit of a bind. The other experience that I had was polar opposite. the special education teacher had shared schedules and IEPs and academic goals to the beginning of, from the start of the year, before the school year even began. So I knew right away, well, who our shared students would be, and when they're with me as a general ed teacher, what can I do to ensure that I'm having them move forward towards success. So two very, very different scenarios. Obviously, the second scenario is the better one to go with, and I highly encourage you guys to think about that as you are collaborating and communicating with general education teachers. Communication is key. You will learn about this and collaboration in a course that's in your program. It's SPD 521. It's all centered around collaboration. So we just wanted you to be aware of that and be on the lookout for that course. To share a little bit more about scheduling specifically, I'm going to hand it back on over to Julie.
Thanks, Em. And a lot of you might have already completed that course, and I know LoudClimb can be a little tricky, so I'm not sure if you have access to that, or I'm hoping that maybe some of you have hopefully saved some resources and strategies that maybe you have found along the way that you felt were really helpful. I can't encourage that enough if you're still taking your coursework, to make sure you are downloading those, keeping them on file. You know, we do try to make sure that we're putting quite a bit in those courses for you. But if it's already passed, we're still going to give you some great resources, some great tools. And there's so much information out there on collaboration and strategies that we can make sure we get you what you need if you feel that's just an area that you feel you need more support in. Scheduling, I can't say enough of what Emily was talking about. It's hard, we know, because you're going in and not only trying to prepare to be a teacher and get into your classroom, but you also have to think about, you know, all these other needs with scheduling. But it's really important right off the bat, again, having those conversations with your mentor, maybe seeing how do you go about this, because the roles could be a little different from that elementary, middle school, and secondary again, what that looks like from the inclusion model with resource self-contained. I saw some of you, you're doing a combined day, what that's going to look like, and how you're going to be able to seek out and work with your gen ed teachers. You know, meeting with them before the students come is so crucial. I can't emphasize that enough. You know, that way, especially if you're in those inclusion settings, you shouldn't be just sitting in the back of the class. You need to be in that active teacher in there. You're co-teaching with them. And at the end of the day, it's about the students. We want to make sure the students are getting what they need, the resources and the support. But we also want to make sure that we're trying to really build those relationships with those gen ed teachers. So that helps you also if you're going into their classroom or you're pulling students out. Also with IEP meetings, making sure that they know they're a part of that. Especially, you know, if you're going in there in that inclusion setting, or if they're being pulled out, we still need to know how they're doing, how they're being supported, and they are a very big member of that team. One area too that I know from my own experience is that confidentiality component. I've seen good and I've seen some bad, and oftentimes it's just because they're not necessarily thinking. And I say that not in a negative way, but there's just a lot that's going on with everybody, where they might have the accommodations sitting out, or they might have a file sitting out. We just want to make sure that we're protecting our students and making sure that documents are kept away and they're not in plain view. So I always have that conversation too, making sure that we're just being careful of that and we're not leaving that information out. But they do understand what maybe needs need to be met with the students and the accommodations. And again, like what Emily was sharing, it's so important that we have that organized and ready to go for the beginning of the school year, because if we're not in a classroom and we need to make sure that they're getting accommodations, modifications, or what we're helping them do to meet their needs is being done. And we're not leaving it for 4 weeks in and they never knew that so-and-so needed help in their class. So that's why it's just so important to get that started right away. And just making sure that you have that down and what your students need and what your gen ed teachers need too, and they know who to come to. Other courses, just to kind of reiterate, like if you've already taken that or might be helpful, were your methods courses and your ESL course, just to go back and maybe think of those. But again, we're also going to give you some resources towards the end. Moving to our next slide. I think, Tracy, we're going to be pulling them here again for looking at their teaching schedule.
Yes, so as you are thinking about your schedule and what type of students you're going to be working with and what content areas you're going to be teaching, please go ahead and share with us a little bit about your teaching schedule and how comfortable you feel with the content matter that you're going to be teaching. Okay, great. And thank you for sharing that with us. And we recognize that some of you may not be absolutely certain which grade levels you'll be teaching, which content areas, but it looks like we have a general consensus. Most of you do know your teaching schedule for the fall, and you know the grade levels and content areas. For your comfort level, it looks like most of you are fairly comfortable, closer to the comfortable side than not. So great, that is super news. Okay, and next we'll have Amy share a little bit with us about how we can prepare to really get in there and help our classroom students and advocate.
Yeah, one way, especially when you're thinking of, you know, the content areas, differentiating your instruction for teaching, is to reach out for help and suggestions. You can often learn the most from your peers, and so we highly encourage that you talk to your fellow grade level teachers about any content questions you might have, as well as your fellow special education teachers for special education teaching tips and strategies. You should not have to entirely manage on your own and completely reinvent the wheel. Rely on your teammates' knowledge, and you really want to just kind of hone in on, you know, the things that you need to attack and the things that you want to attack, and kind of find that happy balance. And Julie has a good example for that.
So one quote that has stayed with me for 20 years now, my mentor, who was my assistant principal at the time, I was very overwhelmed. I went into her office in tears like in week 1, and I just felt really overwhelmed with all of this. And she said, Julie, you have to pick battles big enough to matter and small enough to win. And you have to keep that mindset in with each day, going in and just setting up and getting yourself set up for success and taking kind of one thing at a time. And again, I'm excited to get us towards the end when we get to share some resources with you, because we really want to help. We want to help you plan that attack and get you really ready, not only for your students, but also for yourself going into your classroom this fall. One thing to keep in mind, I know I said a little bit about this, but your student rosters and your caseloads could be a little different, especially at that middle and high school level. So just really make sure that you're getting there, you're looking at them, you're reviewing the IEPs, the needs, the service times, their dates, which I'm going to talk a little bit more here in just a second. But also just making sure you're working with your mentor, your administration, your paras, those that have been there, they have some insight, they can help you, they're going to help get you set up. Make sure you're getting everything set for your students, along with if there's any other additional items that you might need to think about, like your any behavioral management plans that are maybe a part of with the student within their IEP, or maybe just even a program that maybe they follow at their own school too, is also some great things to be keeping in mind as you're getting things set up for your classroom and for your students. And then speaking a little bit about behavior, Emily, I know you'd like to touch base a little bit more on just getting ready for that classroom management piece for your school year.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Julie. So classroom management obviously is a very big piece of running a classroom and feeling prepared. And I'm sure that many of you have different varying levels of comfortability when it comes to classroom management. But the first thing that you really want to consider regarding classroom management are procedures and rules. These really just set the stage for your year and help to set expectations for your students. So first of all, what's the difference between those two things, right? A procedure, it communicates expectations for specific behaviors, and a rule identifies general expectations or standards. You definitely want to start by surveying your school administration to see, are there expectations of the school when it comes to rules and procedures? And with those, you can extend into your own classroom management plan. I'd highly suggest that you extend your classroom management in partnership with your students. When I was in the classroom, something I would always do at the very beginning of the school year is an activity called I Do, You Do. And what that would be is we would just have a classroom discussion, and we would have just an open space, a safe space for students to share. What do you think my job, or in their case, I do, what should I be doing for you? What are some procedures or rules that I should be following to meet your expectations as a student? And then we would flip it around after having that conversation and ask, well, for you, what do I expect from you? And have the students kind of talk that out as well. Well, me as a student, I know that you should expect this out of me or this out of me. This just really opens up the conversation to help build a community in your classroom off the bat, and it really, really helps to build relationships. I'm sure you guys have heard this before, but building those relationships with your students is absolute key, and just the success of them academically, but also behaviorally. Moving on from that, you also want to consider rewards and incentives. So I'm sure you can think of your own experiences in your own experience, K-12, of what those rewards and incentives would be. You can pull on your own experiences to inform your own practices in your classroom management plan. Some examples of rewards and incentives would include, but they're definitely not limited to, games or food or technology and class discussions. I always tended to lean on the class discussions because that's what my middle school students wanted. If you choose to implement these practices within your classroom, just be sure to consider and advocate for your students' needs and their interests. So if you have a lot of students who are very driven by technology, we'll use that as a reward and incentive if they complete their work on time, or they're doing an excellent job, or they're meeting their behavior goals, whatever it may be. And lastly, it's definitely important to consider emergency plans. So those can include fire drills and lockdowns. And when planning for those type of scenarios, which we all have to endure, be sure to, again, reference the school's expectations and be sure to practice with your students. That way, when a fire drill or a lockdown occurs for the first time, it's not mass hysteria. Also, in the same sense, you want to be able to consider and advocate for students' needs in those types of instances. From my experience, a random fire drill would spike anxiety in some of my students. So I knew in that instance, I could reach out to them and I could give them a role or a responsibility when it came to that kind of procedure. That way they would know, okay, it's my time to shine, and instead of focusing on their anxiety, they could focus on what can I do to help my teacher and my fellow classmates. So that's a lot of information. But with that, we want to learn more about you and your comfortability surrounding classroom management. So Tracy, would you like to share?
So go ahead and share with us if you have your classroom management plan in mind, all planned out, and also, are you comfortable with your plan or creating one on a scale of 1 to 5? Okay, great. It looks like most of you do already have your classroom plan, management plan in mind, and most of you are fairly comfortable with your plan. And you, of course, may consider, you may want to make tweaks to that as you start the school year or talk with other teachers, but that looks like a great way to start.
Yeah, I definitely agree. This is great news. Great to see those results. So to kind of piggyback on that, another area to consider that may help you with your comfortability is to create a safe and effective learning space. So some things you might want to think about are student seating. Does that look like rows of chairs or tables? Will you have flexible seating? It's also important to think about the classroom space itself. In my experience, it's best to create a calming, peaceful space. Be thoughtful of the colors that you use, the information on the walls, just to make sure that there's not too many distractions. My classroom always had plants and low lighting and what my students called spa music. And that was just to be for, again, a very calming, peaceful effect when we're working together. I'm sure many of you know that Pinterest is a fantastic place to gain some ideas in case you're looking for some. And also I wanted to share, in my classroom, I incorporated a quiet space for my students to practice mindfulness when they needed some time to just de-escalate, if they were having a hard day, or just, you know, a place for them to take a breather. I called this place the Australia for obvious reasons. It's all by itself. So it was a small table or a small chair desk area that's away from the bulk of the classroom, and in that space I had things like headphones for music and coloring books, etc., and also a timer to help students regroup before joining the class again once the timer had ended. So usually I would give the students 3 minutes tops to kind of have a quiet space for themselves, recenter themselves, and come back to the classroom so they can engage in a better way. Again, it's important to tap into your students' interests, so including items specific to those interests in the Australia or on the walls or in musical choices where appropriate is definitely encouraged. So lastly, we want to point out to you the importance of reaching out to staff around you for support and resources. Never ever be ashamed to reach out to these people around you, because you'll find most of the time they are absolutely willing to jump in and help you to ensure that you are successful. And as Julie had mentioned before, you want to make some go-to friends with people like your school secretary, the custodial staff, and resource officers if you have those on your campus. These people are very, very important into running a smooth school environment, so definitely make them your friends. With that, we're going to jump on into, obviously, a very important thing when it comes to special education, centered around pretty much everything you do, and that's the Individualized Education Plan, or the IEP. So, Julie?
Yeah, so, and I know from being a special ed teacher, it's hard because you have this instructional side that you have to get ready for content planning and instruction. And then you also have this compliance side as well that you're responsible for, and it can get a little overwhelming. Towards the end here, we're going to share a site where you see ADE/ESS, that's Arizona Department of Education, in the exceptional, student services. They have their own page that is just entirely for special education educators, teachers, parents. They have done an amazing job if you haven't gotten in there. There's one in particular area that I would like to show you, but we'll get to it in just a minute. It's program support and monitoring. And it's under, so it'd be ADE, ESS, and then there's that link for program support and monitoring. There's a ton of training material in regards to everything IEP, from the components to timelines, to planning, to your med evals, to additional support, individual school district support. So if you feel like you are overwhelmed where you are and you don't have anybody to go to, or maybe they don't know, there is support there. There are people that you can reach out to there. They are amazing. They have so much on there. I cannot speak to that enough. Because I do want you to feel prepared, and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed, because really the biggest part is getting yourself organized. If you can just get yourself organized, get into your classroom, and I know we're challenged, with COVID, and another great thing with ADE and the site, there's a ton of resources that they're putting out there right now in case you have to do your IEPs virtual, or if you're doing them face-to-face, or whatever that might look like or might you have to do for this fall, I really want you to be checking there regularly, getting on, if your administrator or your special ed director or your mentor who's working with you, if they don't get information from there, I just really want you to make sure that you're checking regularly, because they give so much information, especially right now in this kind of weird limbo where we are, where we're not 100% sure how things are going to happen, especially in regards to meetings and IEPs. I just want you to make sure that you're aware, because it is an amazing resource. So we'll come back to that in just a little bit. Some other great resources you'll see there, your other GCU courses that you might have already taken. It looks like the majority of you have from where you're going to be going in the fall. But if you haven't, those are some great courses just to remind you of where you can get some resources, or maybe if you still have them, looking for support and resources, because we try to give quite a bit, especially in that law, the intro, and the assessment and the IEP planning courses. So Tracy, I know you wanted to kind of take a little comfortability poll, because that's going to help us too with some possible future professional developments.
Yeah, so please go ahead and share with us how comfortable you are with the IEP process. That there again is a 1 to 5 scale. And how comfortable are you with the IEP components, each piece that needs to be included in the IEPs that you write? Okay, great. So it looks like most of you are fairly comfortable with the IEP process. It's okay if you're not totally comfortable yet, then there's an opportunity for us to provide some assistance. And then with the IEP components, it looks like kind of mid-range there as well. So that takes us to survey and future professional development. We do have a survey for you that we are going to send out to you this afternoon after today's webinar that will provide a little more detailed feedback for us in exactly which areas you need support or you would like support. So that's going to be very important for us to review. So we will be sending that out to you again today. And from that, we will be able to plan our future professional developments. So one thing that I was able to participate in with Julie over the summer was the Teach Camp experience, where there were new special education teachers brought together to discuss some of these important responsibilities that they have in community and talk about strategies. So that's kind of the idea that we'd like to duplicate with all of you. We may not be able to bring you all together in person, but we can still provide that type of support and community. So some areas we think that there may be an opportunity to provide additional support is in the area of compliance. That would include IEPs and monitoring and support of your classroom students. Also the area of collaboration and communication. I know we talked about that a lot today, but that is so important, especially for a new special education teacher like yourself. And then also the area of instruction and planning. And I know we do have some great resources for you in some of these areas. So certainly all areas of opportunity that might be nice for us to discuss in future meetings and sessions. So again, just filling out that survey for us after today's meeting or in the next few days, that would be so helpful for us. Now we do have another poll for you right now. And we are going to poll you on of the future professional development sessions, which would be your top choice. Okay, and it looks like we have two clear areas where you would like some additional support in both compliance and instruction and planning. So certainly that is helpful for us, and you will be able to share a little bit more detail about that with us in the survey that we send out. And that kind of takes us to our next slide here, our professional learning network. And some of you may have been in this network before. That's where you may have received your alternative teaching program manual or training. However, this screenshot here shows the alternative teaching SPED space, which is a new group space on our professional learning network just for you in this group. So I'd like to go ahead and share with you what that space looks like. Okay, and hopefully you can see my screen with the Professional Learning Network. When you first log into this Professional Learning Network, which is pln.gcu.edu, you'll see this home page. And from here, if you scroll down, something I wanted to show you is our social media links on the left-hand side at the bottom here. We do have a Pinterest, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. We have a Teaching in Purple blog, and we have a podcast, Top of the Class. So that's something that I wanted to point out to you. But also,
Tracy, I think the view is, they're just seeing the PowerPoint page.
oh, okay. Let me try that again. Thank you for that. Hopefully you can see my Professional Learning Network now.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, and again, right when you log in, again, it's pln.gcu.edu. You do log in with your GCU portal credentials, so that shouldn't be a problem. When you're on the home page, the social media links there are on the bottom, on the left-hand side. Also want to point out this resources folder, because we do have a resource folder here specifically for special education. So some of the various things you'll see in there is the resources that we're going to put particular for this group. We also have some recorded Explore More webinars, which are 1-hour sessions discussing particular topics, some IEP resources, exam prep, and some information on standards, ethics, and dispositions. But specifically, I wanted to show you in groups. We have this new group called Alt Teaching SPED. And here we have a link to the SPED survey. We are also going to send that to you by email, but I wanted to include the link here in case you lost it. And also some important links, the Student Success Center, which Amy was mentioning earlier, some learning resources, the Alternative Teaching Program Manual, the SPED resource packet that we've put together for you specifically for this group, and then the presentation that we've shown you today. Here on the left-hand side, you can see the calendar feature that shows us that we did have a session today. And if you scroll down, you can see a little bit more about what the space entails. This black menu bar across the center of your screen, that's how you navigate within the Alt Teaching SPED space. So for resources, calendar, and topics for discussion. Okay, so let me go ahead and stop sharing that with you, and we'll go back to our presentation.
And then we have a question from Erin, trying to log in with their GCU credentials, and they it was wrong, or they couldn't get in. Any hints or anything with that, Tracy?
Sure, any issues that you have with logging into the PLN, you can call our GCU tech support and they can help you with that.
And I had some trouble too. It's just sometimes it's just a little glitch and they can fix it pretty quickly.
Great. Okay, so that takes us to our next slide, checking in and asking for support. Go ahead, Julie.
So getting you ready for this year, and we just want to make sure that you're taking time for you too, self-care. I'm sure you might have heard of this word. You know, it could be a buzzword, but it is very true. And I can't express enough to make sure that you're taking care of you, especially going into this first year. making sure that you are setting limits and boundaries to take care of you. And I say that because it's very easy to fall into, you're working all day, you're bringing work home, you're working on the weekends, and it's just, you need to find that balance, because we don't want you to burn out. We don't want you to burn out because you're doing this. We want you to love your students, love your teaching, love what you're doing, but also not forgetting about you and your family and your other loved ones. So really sticking to a time management, and we all work different. Some of us are night owls, some of us are up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at, like, I had a colleague that got up at 3 a.m. every day, worked out, got to school. She was there before I think anybody else was there, but that's just how she functioned. That's what she did. Whereas me, I was a little bit later. I also coach, so I was a little bit later in the day, but you have to find what's going to work for you, but also stick to it and stick to your time. So if you want to allow yourself time in the morning, like an hour or 2 extra hours in the morning to prep, plan, get your IEPs written, grade, or maybe it's in the evening, but stick to that time. And I say that so that you keep peace of mind, because again, we don't want you to burn out. Again, I want you to think of that quote, battles big enough to matter, small enough to win. Rome wasn't built in a day, right? You need to make sure you're taking care of you. What can you take care of today? Also think of some ways to organize yourself in your classroom, from like emails, because one big feedback I got from this experience this last year in working with the new teachers was, they had so many emails or so many phone calls. Start color coding using your Outlook. You know, what's level like right now you need to get back to? What can you get back to, you know, tomorrow? You know, where does your energy need to go for now? Then you can get into the next day. Something that you could even do in your teaching hours, have an out of office reply on and give people your schedule. Say, you know, this is my teaching time, this is my prep time, and this is when I can get back to you. As long as people know that you're going to get it, you're going to receive it, you're going to get back to them, that's all they need to know. You know, even if it's just a follow-up saying, you know what, I will get back to you by such and such, I apologize. You know, if they know that their kid, you're taking care of the students, that's what they need to know. And maybe you just can't get to everybody one day, and that's going to be okay. Make sure you're taking care of your high level, your students, you know, your compliance, your teaching. Get yourself organized so that you're not frantic and you're thinking of at like 7 o'clock at night like you didn't do something, because that's the worst feeling. So that's my biggest thing, like we're talking about that organization and planning, because I can't stress that enough. One big thing too that I learned this last year was Jamie Valderrama. She's from ASU. She's a professor over there, and she helps to teach mindfulness, which is another big thing that we're hearing a lot about. Whether is your mind full of like have to do's, or are you being mindful in everything that you're doing? And a simple trick she taught that I truly have been using is, sometimes it's hard for us to switch gears from home life. We're having a crazy morning, and then you got to get ready and have your game face on for school. And something just as simple as like sitting in your car, giving yourself a minute, 2 minutes to take some breath and transition yourself from like personal life to professional life, and then even vice versa, because we know we have some crazy days, and then you have to be ready to go into home. And she teaches this technique of 4-7-8, where you inhale for 4, you hold for 7, and you exhale for 8. Try it. It's life-changing. I've done it myself. So just make sure that, you know, reflection is good, time is good, but take care of you. So Amy, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, and another thing is just to rely on one another and kind of get to know the other people that are in your similar situation. So as you already could see from this poll, there's a lot of you that are student teaching. There's some that are just starting. Some of you might be in the same district and don't know it. Some of you could be, you know, in the same, you know, part of this city, state, you know, there could be all different things that you have in common. So we really are going to ask, you know, try to use the PLN, utilize it to your advantage. It's an excellent way that you can kind of share ideas, your locations, teaching tips. I mean, you can learn from each other. And so that's again, that PLN alternative teaching SPED space. And then we're going to we'll jump in there as well. And we're going to put a lot of resources in there. We already have some in there, as you saw. And just a kind of another reminder, again, reach out to your teaching colleagues and school administrators for any support you feel you need throughout the year. You want to make sure you're advocating for yourself. I think now we have resources.
All right, and I know I'm trying to keep an eye on our time, so I did want to just jump into this site real quick, Tracy, if we can, for Arizona Department of Ed. Again, I can't stress this enough. Put it on your tab. Keep it as a favorite so it's easy. You can you have accessibility to it. It's not only the homepage, because there's a lot of great COVID updates. I'm sure, you know, working with your mentor and your administration too, they're going to provide you that guidance as well. But there's just a ton of information, again, for you within that ESS area. And then, Tracy, were you going to share, or did you need me to share?
Yeah, Julie, if you want to go ahead and share.
Okay. Get this pulled up for you all.
And while Julie's pulling that up, you guys, we just want to reiterate again, another go-to resource for you are going to be those syllabi that you are experiencing as you're jumping into courses. We want to make sure that if you get the chance to save those copies of syllabi, because there's so many fantastic resources within the courses that you're taking that you might want to reference later on in the future.
And can everyone, thank you, Emily. Can everyone see my screen on your end? You should see that Arizona Department of Education.
Yes, we do.
Wonderful. So this is that homepage. Again, remember I said you can get a lot of great information of what's going on, the here and now. But if you go up to where it says schools and teachers, and you could even do the search, but right here for special education ESS, this is where I want you to go and make sure that you're using some resources, because that's amazing. And if you look, and I know I'm trying to be careful of our time so that I can get everything in here, but one area where I had referred to with that program support and monitoring, I love this area. It's wonderful. It's full of support for IEP information. I'm hoping you can still see that on my screen. Everyone see that okay? Everyone's seeing program support and monitoring? Emily, Tracy?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. And if you see here over here in resources, there's just so much information with guide steps to helping you get through your IEP process, forms. Just please take a look if you have questions there. It's a great help. Just this whole area is wonderful for you to use with the quick links, facts, contacting, even conferences coming up. So take a peek there. And I'll stop this, Tracy, if you wanted to pull up that resource. Or I think I even have that up too.
I have it right here.
Sorry about that. There we go. So this is going to be in your PLN as well. And we've put together, and I've actually taken a lot of this too from my experiences last year with Peace Camp, so thank you, ADE. But we've prepared a little resource guide for you on just some things from what do I need, how to prepare for students and substitutes. It's tabbed, so it's pretty easy to navigate. It has that navigation piece. And if you're just in your Word document, go up to your panel, that navigation guide, and it gives you a nice little way to get through. We've created these for you, so please print them out, use them. You'll see how there's some sources on there to use before school starts, subs, creating that positive learning environment like we talked about, some ideas for planning and instruction, and a few links and resources we put into for you towards the end. As I'm talking so quickly, and I know Tracy's trying to get there. So additional site links for you we've put where I felt that has been really helpful, where I've seen questions and links that I've provided for others. There is a ton of stuff here, and I want you to be able to take time and look through it. There's some that are in there too with videos to help walk you through even the IEP process and IEP meetings, because I know that's a big area that we have questions on. So thank you for pulling that up. And again, you can find that in the PLN.
And just a reminder, you want to log in with your GCU credentials. Any issues you have, you want to call 602-639-7700. And again, you're looking for the Alt Teaching SPED group space resources.
So I know we had a lot of information for you today. If you have any questions, please go ahead and type those in the chat, and we will make sure we get to those in a future session. And if you have anything urgent, I'm sure your counseling team can help you as well. Also, we are going to be sending out that survey again today, and you can also access it in our Professional Learning Network group space, as I showed you earlier. So again, thank you everyone so much for attending today. We hope this was helpful for you, and we hope to see you in a future session.
And yes, this is recorded and it's going to be available in that PLN space. Absolutely. And thank you for
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We're so glad that you were able to join us today.